So about a year and a half ago, I did a podcast with Sean Collins, who's a TV critic and culture writer for lots of different places, Rolling Stone, Pitchfork, etc. And we were lamenting the increasing use of hugely famous, culturally significant songs in totally untested, first season streaming television programming on Netflix, Amazon, etc. And so we did this podcast and we kind of, talked about our favorite cues from the history of music and, things like In Your Eyes and Say Anything, really significant uses of pop music to underscore, ground, a piece of cinematic entertainment. But it felt like all of a sudden everyone was able to do this without having proven anything. Like you didn't have to be a huge director, a big name like Martin Scorsese to get a huge song in your movie or your show, or you didn't have to go crate digging the way that, let's say, Quentin Tarantino had done. He is literally the reason there was a surf revival in the early and mid 90s. Like Man or Astro Man, your whole career, Quentin Tarantino hooked you up. Things have changed really dramatically, and they've gotten totally out of hand in the last year and a half since we did this podcast, to the point where now there is an Emmy category for original music supervision. We're going to give you an Emmy for the decision you made to put a certain piece of music over a particular cue in a show or a film. Like you get Zach Howie in Master of None, right? And he goes and he brokers some deal with the Burundian government to get this completely obscure song, and he's making these character portraits and playlists. And I mean, you're just kind of disappearing up your own ass at that point. It's not necessary to do any of this to pick a fucking music cue for a show. What are we celebrating, right? Like Nora Felder. Okay, so we're doing like an adolescent slow dance, right? And it's supposed to be set in like right about 1982, 1983. What do you think would lay in there and really, enrich that moment? I'm going to need a while before I come up with fucking Time After Time by Cyndi Lauper.
Hey, zombie boy. Do you want to dance?
I don't.
That's your crate digging. Like that's really, I don't know what kind of, past and obsession with music you have to be able to do that kind of cultural archaeology. I had done a video 5 years ago, the last time I ever did a video, called The Hiding, which is about the fact that people who really care about music and for whom music has been really important on its own, they have to hide at this point. Because these people who are being nominated for music supervision awards, they're fucking skimming my playlists on Spotify. They're reading old Pitchfork reviews I wrote. They're just skimming the fucking internet. They're going through SoundCloud and Twitter to just pick out what people are talking about. They don't even have to know anything about music. They just need to be able to pass themselves off to the other people in the room working on this TV show that they've made like a really wizened, credible choice. It's really nuanced. This is in a particularly great place in the marketplace right now. The demographics that are lining up with this song, it's a win. It's a real win for us.
Here's Jen Malone from Atlanta.
I follow all these random people's playlists, and I have my Instagram, Twitter, blogs. I mean, it's just, you can kind of just go down a rabbit hole and not come out for like 3 or 4 days and have so much new music that you're like, I don't even know where to start. That aspect of discovery for us, and then seeing everybody else in the, in the show universe and the Twitter universe kind of picking it up and again, causing that discussion about the new artists and about the new music that people wouldn't find unless it was in our shows. I think that's something that I think, all of us are really proud of, is to find these underground bands that nobody knows about, and then all of a sudden give them a placement and their lives significantly can change.
Get the fuck out of here. You are doing nothing. I am the biggest fan in the world of the idea of pop art, the idea of pointing at something and calling it art, and that being art, signing your name on a toilet. That's beautiful to me. I love Dada. I love pop art. I love all that stuff. And situations, however far you want to go with it, right? Society, the spectacle, yada, yada, yada. That stuff's great. But that comes from a faith and a belief in the kind of insouciant brilliance of the person who's pointing their finger. Because really the work of art is their finger that's telling you this other thing is art. It's your trust in that person as a conduit. We've created such an on-off relationship with music now that music's become information, that there's really a no-win situation for the musician and for the fan of music first and foremost, who doesn't want to see it get cross-branded and cross-promoted and synced and absorbed in a million other things that frankly probably suck. a good example of what happens if your success and stability financially as a musician is derived from its association with a piece of film. It's Jose Gonzalez. He was in the Sony Bouncing Balls commercial, which is one of the most famous, important, remarkable pieces of abstract advertising in history. But his song and his career was totally subsumed by its participation in that multimedia piece of art. So the music doesn't get to have its own life. If music keeps being used this way, there's very little incentive for kids to think that there's anything cool about it. If all this music, this indie punk, historic, underground, whatever, and I mean whatever, hip hop, you name it, if it doesn't get rebroadcast by a current media platform on the internet that's hooked into the advertising and metadata streams that Google, Facebook, and everyone else scrapes, no one's ever going to know about it again. Go look at like the Spotify numbers for bands like Rodan, Seam. Like go look at all this shit that was like so important to all the indie kids in the 90s. It's dead. It doesn't exist. No one's keeping it alive because there's just not that many people who give a shit about exploring the history of music. Like I'm a huge fan of the work that, the Future What podcast coming out of Kill Rock Stars, Portia does. These are all fascinating podcasts and they're really honest and they're upfront about discussing what musicians are going through and what they have to deal with in order to try and make a living, Yeah, it's wicked hard to make a living in music. Guess what? It fucking always was. And I guess maybe my generation is part of the problem here. Like we infected you with the idea that there was this halcyon indie punk thriving 7-inch scene and zines and shit in the 90s. And like, honestly, maybe 50, 75,000 people nationwide in America ever participated in this. I mean, that's just nothing. Most people arrive at music in a kind of anecdotal way. They watch shows. They want storytelling. They want virtual emotion encapsulated in visual storytelling. So that's one reason that sync licensing, the use of music in these shows and in these movies, has exploded. That just can't happen, right? And this is the other part of it, that none of these people who are so invested in trying to figure out the state of music and the state of how musicians can make a living seem to be talking about. Maybe they don't understand it. There's one person whose entire life is actually a great analogy for what happens to a music obsessive. His name is Matt Pincus. Matt was, as a teenager, the bassist for the New York City hardcore straight edge band Judge.
My head is thinking straight, but my heart doesn't explode. The thought of someone else is much too much.
So Matt, he's a teenager, right? He's in a hardcore band. He's doing whatever he's doing. That's what kids do. You're a kid. You want to play in a band, cut loose, go crazy, right? Then you suddenly are too old to be in a band anymore. So what do? You start a record label. And he started Some Records, who almost signed my band. And so you have a record label and you live in a triple-decker or some shithole apartment, and you're so obsessed with the authenticity of all the decisions you make and the artistic control you have. And, he had like Air Type 11 and these like shit emos, sort of almost post-rock, awful bands. And as you start doing that, you start having control over the licensing of this music. And what happened with Matt is the same thing that happens with anybody who runs a record label for a long enough period of time. You look at the total profit, or there is no profit, but let's say you had a profit as a record label over 7 years. You look at that and then you license your first song and you've just added 2 zeros to the entire lifetime income of your record label. And so Matt figured that out quickly, and he started signing stuff like The Exit and, just really cheesy shit that was more marketable to sync up with commercials. There's all kinds of articles about him online saying he's, fighting the good fight. And this is the same bullshit you hear from all these people. Their rubric never changes. We're all about the artist, man. We are a totally artist-centric publishing company. All we want to do is help artists figure out how they can, make a living and make music. Anytime you hear somebody in fucking publishing or any legal construct start telling you that they're for artists first, get the fuck out of there. The only thing that people in these businesses are concerned about is owning intellectual property. And that's what nobody involved in this dialogue has figured out. And it's already happening. It's already observable. Matt started a publishing company called Songs. He got Carrie Ann Marshall. He got hooked up with like really famously successful music supervisors and sync licensors who had tons of experience in this space. And then all of a sudden, all at once, he got Lorde, Diplo, The Weeknd. He had insane publishing rights in his catalog. And what's the first thing that happened? He got fucking bought out. $150 million, December 2017, Songs Publishing. Now, all the music rights in the world are basically owned by 3 companies, Sony ATV, Universal Music Group, and BMG. It's like 70% of recorded music ever. The publishing rights and the ability to do sync and blanket licensing is controlled by those 3 companies or their subsidiaries. So really, Google has bought Songs. And, you know, obviously Google Alphabet runs YouTube. And that's what the long tail is here. Google, Amazon, Netflix, they're going to buy all the music publishing they can. Because if they own it, they don't have to waste time scanning to see if there's been a copyright infringement on a YouTube video. They can just put out a fucking shopping list online and say, you know, if a video gets X many hits and it has like a fucking Echo and the Bunnymen song in the background, here's Echo and the Bunnymen's publishing company's cut. I mean, it's just nuts. Like, Anthony Fantano can't even play a clip from the album he's reviewing, but his review of that album is going to be viewed, like, you know, witnessed by more people than will probably ever hear most of the shit he's talking about. YouTube knows that's not right. They're going to fix that. These technology companies have amassed so much money through advertisers and, you know, control access, you paying for their services, that now, instead of coming to all these legal agreements like the Music Modernization Act, this bill is like, it's literally from 10 years ago. Nothing in it has any relevance whatsoever. The technology companies already know where they're going, and no one else seems to get it. Streaming services like Spotify and Apple Music, they didn't come for the music industry. It was fucking given to them by Universal Music Group, Sony ATV, you know, it was originally Warner Publishing. Like, your band sold all that publishing right to those companies, whether you knew it or not. If you weren't paying attention, how is that their fucking fault? I look at what my kids are going to want to do when they're teenagers, and like, I wouldn't want to play in a fucking band. I wouldn't want to be a musician. Like, it's fucking stupid. I'd want to make vines and make fucking ASMR videos. I'd have like a fucking white t-shirt with Pigs Bum 53 written on it and fucking laundry marker, or like a fucking ephemeral rift bike messenger bag. Like, because ASMR is like a community right now. It's a thriving community. It's a self-policing community, you know? And that's what you want. And you're not going to get that out of music. I mean, you can try. What are you going to make, like a cryptocurrency record label? It's just not going to happen. This is my 11-year-old's current group chat at school. Gucci Gang. Yeah. And there's like fucking entitled dipshit music Twitter assholes in New York talking about this fucking nonsense. Like, they broke it, or they have some like involvement and control over how music is getting to people. You're just talking to each other. You're not impacting culture. You're not doing anything. Everyone's finding out about this stuff on their own. They're talking about it to each other. They don't need you for anything. They don't need me, for that matter, for anything. There's just not that many people who end up needing music, using music, and living with music to the extent that someone like myself did. And any of these people that are still clinging on to these bullshit, you know, music writer jobs in New York and like 2 other places. I mean, half the fucking publications they've all gone away. The year and a half I've been out of this, it's just fucking unbelievable. It's like scorched earth. And it's just so pathetic. I mean, I see the people who will take these jobs. It's just fucking shameful. Like, you should be ashamed of yourself. You're aggregating fucking advertising. Fuck you. You don't care about music. You care about getting paid for the fucking easiest job you can possibly do. Talking shit about bands. Yay! I don't know who sold people on this entitlement that they should be able to make a fucking living wage talking about pop music. Like, did you go to J school? Is there some fucking asshole in J school I need to talk to? Who's telling you, yeah, take that internship at Pitchfork? It could really lead somewhere. No. It's not a fucking necessary function. Information is being aggregated automatically. It's over. People are going to go back to talking amongst themselves because they're all going to have the same information.
You're gonna be nowhere. The loneliest kind of lonely. It may be rough going just to do your thing. The hardest thing to do. But you gotta make your own kind of music.
whole Supreme thing, the limited edition phony scarcity thing. I look at Fear of God, like, what the fuck is this? You're still selling like 90s skinhead bomber jackets for $1,100 and the same fucking stonewashed ripped jeans? Didn't Kanye just wear that like not that long ago? Wasn't that Salem's whole thing? Like, nobody even has any new fucking ideas. I just leave it. Fuck it.